Rangers fans, welcome to the best Rangers podcast in town. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis, and we are Liberty Blue. We scream about the Rangers and we yell and we lose our voice so that you can save your voice and that you don't have to. That's how deeply we care about you, and we appreciate that you've joined us for the ride. This is episode 3 of Liberty Blue live on Twitch. Now, this is the second episode that we are recording live and broadcasting on Twitch right now. If you missed the live episode on Twitch, the full episode with video will be on our YouTube. And if you just want to listen to the audio, it'll be on Apple and Spotify and all the glorious ways that you listen to the episode. It'll be on there on audio. And Nick, we have some breaking news here, of course, with Game 6 being last night. The Colorado Avalanche have defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games to hoist the Stanley Cup, and we're getting some great videos out of that. For your first reactions to that really quickly before we move on to anything else.
Very satisfying Stanley Cup victory, I would say, for the Avalanche. Long time coming. They've gone through some very weird iterations. Everybody remembers the very, very weird Patrick Waugh stuff. Everybody very much remembers them bottoming out, Matt Duchene demanding to get traded to a playoff team, and then getting traded to Ottawa, who proceeded to miss the playoffs that year, which was very funny. They picked in the top 5 a couple of times. They took a bunch of defensemen. They got Sam Girard in that Matt Duchene trade, and they bided their time, and they bided their time. And then the last couple of years, they had close calls. They couldn't get out of the second round a couple of years in a row, and a lot of people kind of looking around, waiting to see what exactly would be the right combination of guys, and they found it this year. Very satisfying. I think a lot of people understood just kind of how much this meant to that group and this particular version of that group when as soon as the game was over, Matt Duchene just tackled Eric Johnson. I think that kind of told everybody.
Not Matt Duchene. Matt Duchene's not on this team.
Excuse me, Nathan McKinnon. Yeah, I have Matt Duchene on the. Right. I have Matt Duchene on the brain, but yeah, when Nate McKinnon tackled Eric Johnson as soon as the game was over, I think that kind of told you how much this meant to that group to get it done for this particular version of that group.
Yeah, I like this. This was. I said this in the pre-show, and the pre-show is not part of the episode. And if you want to listen to the pre-show and be a part of the pre-show, well, tune into Twitch next time, and you will be a part of the live conversation. But this series had everything, right? This series, if you love the hitting and you're a big hashtag grit guy and you love these big hits thrown around, this series had hitting. If you love passing and flashy plays and all these things, this series had that too. If you like goals being scored and you want nonstop action, this series had that too. This 6 games, the only way it could have been better is that this series went 7. I mean, everything that you possibly could have wanted out of a 6-game final that decided who won the Stanley Cup, this series had it all. It was such an enjoyable experience, and it was a great way for people that aren't hockey fans to get involved in the sport of hockey. This wasn't a trap, slow, grindy kind of cup final. This was 60 minutes plus, if you count the overtime as well. This was 60 minutes of nonstop back and forth 200-foot type of action. And it was phenomenal for the sport for so many different ways, but also because of the new TV deal, it being on ABC, because it was broadcasted to more people than ever before, than before with NBC, more people got a taste of what hockey is. And that is so big that a lot of people are kind of missing about this, is not only were these 6 games so enjoyable for hockey fans that were already fans before the final, but this was a phenomenal 6 games for people that had no idea what hockey was and wanted to see what it was like for themselves. And boy, did they get a treat.
Amazing hockey all the way around. Like you mentioned, I think it was Sean Shapiro of The Athletic who wrote a story about that, the new TV deal and how it impacted viewership, it impacted advertising. And we talked about this at the end of the last episode where we answered a question about when we might actually see a real salary cap increase. This made a real dent, and they were able to sell advertising spots for more money because more people were watching. So these are the kinds of little incremental things that will help the NHL go a little bit closer to baseball, to basketball, to football. It probably won't ever be able to catch any of them, but a little bit closer. Make the players able to earn a little bit more money. The salary cap be able to go up a little bit more. That's all we're looking for here. In terms of the hockey itself, and we talked about this on the pre-show, and I've been reading a lot about this and thinking a lot about this, just this is where hockey is going. You are going to need to have six defensemen who are going to be able to either skate the puck out of trouble or pass the puck out of trouble. The defensemen who bank the puck off the glass, those guys are going to start becoming dinosaurs in the league because those are going to be viewed as turnovers. They are not, you don't think of it as a turnover when you just clear the zone just to get a breath, but that's what that is effectively. And when you're a team like Colorado, who by the way was missing Sam Girard, so our old buddy Jack Johnson had to slide into the lineup for 13 playoff games. When you think about Colorado, where they have Makar, they have Taves, they have Byram, Eric Johnson a little bit slower now, not nearly as mobile as he used to be, but 4 to 5D who are all agile skaters and strong passers. Forward groups with the ability to play multiple styles at once. A great coming out party for Valery Nichushkin, who all of us stat nerds have known for very while now, is pretty good. And he just found the back of the net a little bit more than he usually did, which is why he was so much more noticeable. That's probably my big takeaway when I start thinking about this series, what I would think about this series from a year from now, 5 years from now, is just this is where hockey is going. You need to be fast. You need to have multiple ways to play, and you can't hide anyone. That's the biggest thing. You're not going to be able to hide a line. You can't get by playing one of your 4 lines 11 and a half, 12 minutes a game. It's just not a tenable situation. And it's especially fresh in my mind because that's what the Rangers were doing a lot against Tampa, was playing the top 6 a crisp 40 minutes of the game and the bottom 6 12 to 13 minutes a game. And that's just not a tenable situation for anybody.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about as well, is that the Rangers had no shot, I think, of beating the Avs. I mean,
No.
I guess, like, are you, so you're saying there's a chance, like, yeah, like, was there a percentage of a chance that the Rangers are going to win? I mean, I guess, yeah, sure, they made it this far. I mean, might as well. But, like, objectively here, whether you're a Rangers fan or not, like, let's be honest with ourselves here for a second. Game 6 of the Stanley Cup final, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning, were down a goal heading into the third period of a Game 6. If they lost this period, they lost the Stanley Cup. The Colorado Avalanche held them to 4 shots on goal. 4 shots on goal. The Lightning had nothing. They had nowhere to go. The Avalanche were suffocating the 2-time Cup champions in the neutral zone, the offensive zone, the defensive zone. The Avalanche, for long stretches of that third period, looked like they were down a goal, and how they were pressuring and how they were attacking. They weren't turtling like Gallant had the Rangers do for a large portion of the playoffs whenever they had a lead. The Avalanche kept coming, and the Lightning had nowhere to go. 4 shots on goal. The Rangers wouldn't have 4 shots the entire game the way the Avalanche played. Let's be honest with ourselves here. The Rangers were bad 5-on-5 for the vast majority of the playoffs, and it wasn't just miraculously going to get better against the team that dominates 5-on-5 the way Colorado does. And sure, Darcy Kemper may not be Vasilevsky or Shesterkin, but you can't win games against average goaltenders if you don't get shots on goal on them. Like, the Avalanche were so good, they played such a dominant game in front of their goaltender that no matter who you had in net, I don't want to say it didn't matter because Darcy Kemper did make some big saves, but they played so well in front of their goaltender that they didn't need Vasilevsky in net because they played such a team game. It didn't matter. And Colorado dominated so hard. Again, 2-time Cup champions going for a third. Game 6, third period, down a goal. They need one. They got 4 shots on goal.
To your point about Darcy Kemper, there was a lot of that post-series wrap-up today. Most of the analytic websites, most of the regular websites put out their post-series write-ups and started doing the statistical deep dives. Number one, Kemper finished with the second worst goals saved above expected per 60 of all goalies who made at least one appearance in the playoffs. He was the first goalie since Marc-Andre Fleury in 2009 to be the goalie of a championship team in the NHL with a negative goal save above expected. So, outlier statistics. Number two, he faced as many expected goals throughout this entire postseason as Jake Ottinger did in that first round series against the Calgary Flames. Colorado made his life manageable, not a significant workload, and that's the key here. Colorado had better underlying statistics last year. Last year in the 56 game season, they pushed 60% expected goals and like 55% goals for at 5-on-5 last year. And they were a little bit less than that this year, and they were still one of, if not the best teams in the entire sport at 5-on-5. And it's why everybody who was kind of watching the Rangers with a cautious optimism from October till pre-trade deadline was, yeah, sure, it's nice they keep winning all these games, but eventually they're going to have to score some goals at 5-on-5 if they want to win anything. And they got pretty damn far as a group that couldn't score at 5-on-5. They got pretty damn far as a group that basically was bad 40 minutes out of 60, 45 minutes out of 60 in every single hockey game. So it's weird. And the way I would describe it is, if you go to the casino and you sit down at a table to play blackjack and you hit on 16 and you get a 5, that's basically what the Rangers did for an entire season. It worked. You probably shouldn't try that again. Like, if you try doing that for a whole season again, you're probably not going to get as good results. But it worked. So you take that, you put that in your file of evidence, and you start saying, okay, how can we improve? Anything else you want to get in on Colorado before we transition to the next part of the conversation?
No, I mean, I think we talked about enough. I mean, like, I think that third period is going to be watched by every coach in the sport of hockey for years to come, because of just how textbook that was in terms of how to protect the lead and what to do when you're up a goal in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. I mean, for the Lightning to only have 4 shots on goal in a period that they desperately needed to win in order to stay alive in the final. You literally could not play a better period than that. And Jared Bednar deserves all the credit in the world for just how dominant his team played in the most critical time of the year.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I know we're going to talk about Bednar a little bit more specifically later on in the episode. But last thing on this series and the season that just finished, before we start talking a little bit more Ranger specific. If I ask you, what are you going to remember most about this playoffs in particular, just the playoffs, what would you say?
In terms of the Avalanche, or just like
about
everybody?
Just the NHL in general.
It was exciting. It was really exciting to watch. And I mean, I'm biased, right? Because I'm a big hockey fan. Like, this is what I do. Like, I have 2 shows, and you talk a lot of hockey. Like, this is what we live and breathe by, and we think it's interesting pretty much no matter who plays. Like, if Arizona and Buffalo were playing right now, I'd turn that on and I'd watch it. There's nobody else that's playing, so might as well turn that on. So, but even if you're not a hockey fan, I think you have to say that this playoff overall was very exciting. There was so many just fun games to watch. There was so much back and forth. There was so many so many nervous moments, so many like the drama and all the back and forth action. It was overall one of the most enjoyable playoff experiences that I can remember in a while. Not to say that others weren't enjoyable per se, because I mean, playoff runs are playoff runs, but this one in particular to me stands out. This was back and forth for 2 months.
Aside from the 2 like murder series where you had Florida who got swept and you had Nashville who got swept, every series was pretty, like, even the Battle of Alberta, which was only 5 games, was a pretty good series.
15 goals in that first game. I mean, make a save, please, somebody out there. I'm begging you. Oh,
Darcy Kemper is going to get paid. That's going to be the Oilers' bailout plan. We're going to get a goalie who just won the Stanley Cup. That's going to be the big brain decision the Oilers make to try and fix their team, because
that's a really good thought, because I know Darcy Kemper is a UFA. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, the Avs are going to bring back Kemper only because this 1A 1B situation worked so well, and Darcy Kemper didn't have the most amazing stats, so he's probably gonna not demand a whole lot more. And I would imagine that he'd want to stay in a place that he just want to stay in the Cup, right? Like the Avs have the space to bring him back if Darcy Kemper doesn't ask for the sun and the moon and everything in between. But I thought, okay, well, Darcy's probably going to want to come back. The Avs probably want him back. It's probably going to fit. Now that you mention that, though, because I don't know if you know this, Nick, but Koskinen is out the door. See, he went back to Europe. Oh, wait, does that mean that the Oilers now have a goalie spot available? And the Darcy Kemper, who just won a Stanley Cup, is he a UFA? Oh, yeah. Do I smell he's 32 years old, by the way. Do I smell a 4-year, $15 million contract? $20 million contract?
A little more than that. Probably like 23, 24, something like that. 5 point something. The Oilers not getting Jacob Markstrom 2 years ago is the biggest sliding doors thing imaginable. Because if the Oilers had an elite goalie like Markstrom, they probably would have been pretty good the last 2 years. But that's hockey. The sliding door stuff is what drives you nuts. Speaking of sliding doors, we can talk about sliding doors with Panarin specifically because that's one of the big ones. Because the Rangers were in the second year of their rebuild that summer, and they said, okay, this is taking too long. We're going to trade for Trouba. We're going to bring in Panarin. We're going to speed this up a little bit because we still have Kreider. We still have Zibanejad. We still have Henrik Lundqvist. And we think we can be competitive, and we can throw these younger guys into the mix. And Panarin's been here. He's set a career high twice now. He set it his first year here, and then this past season that just wrapped up, he topped that career high in points. Been pretty much stapled to that second line the entire time he's been here. When he was first here, people forget they did him, Zibanejad, and Kreider for like a week, and it was not very good, and they broke that up, and he slid down, and then they traded for Strome later on in that season. But for the most part, I think everybody is in unanimous agreement that even if Panarin doesn't fit the window of contention perfectly, when you can add a top 10 to 15 player in the entire sport, you do it, and you worry about the consequences later. Our good friend, who I do not enjoy Arthur Staples' writing style. He is very much writes from his point of view, which I understand he's a columnist, but he's got a narrow point of view, which is why I get frustrated with his opinion. And he wrote a very long form, do they stay or do they go, for every single player on the team. And in the blurb about Panarin, who was in the I wouldn't be that surprised column where kind of open to being moved, but not probably going to be moved. Panarin was in that category of player. Mentioned that 2 different league sources said that Rangers general manager Chris Drury was unhappy with Panarin's production in the postseason and unhappy with his play. I am going to take that with a grain of salt because these could be other GMs just trying to sow discord amongst the team, which, that's what good GMs do. They manipulate the media. But at the same time, would it be really that surprising if this general manager who just did all that work at the trade deadline be a little bit disappointed his most expensive player didn't totally carry the team like we were talking about in the pre-show?
I mean, there's 2 schools of thought here, and I think you can fall into both and equally be valid here. I think you can say that Panarin still deserves that kind of contract because he was dominant in the regular season. He was dominant for good stretches of the playoffs as well in terms of I think he put up still 16 points in 20 games on power play. He was lethal, but at the same time, at 5-on-5, he objectively wasn't very good, especially when you get further in the playoffs. Against Pittsburgh, he was very clearly hurt, and I still think he was hurt for the entire playoffs, even though the Rangers may not have outwardly said so. His style of play, regular season to playoffs, was so totally different that there is no way a professional hockey player, especially of Panarin's stature, changes so drastically in such a short amount of time unless there's something wrong. So I still maintain that Panarin had some kind of injury that he's not being public about, but still you have to be concerned of how Artemi Panarin played at 5-on-5. There were a lot of turnovers. There was a lot of plays that he made during the regular season that worked, and early in the playoffs that worked, that teams figured out, hey, maybe let's not let Panarin do these things. And what do you know? They fixed their issues. They adapted on the fly, and Panarin really didn't. There was one of his most signature plays is he speeds down the wing into the offensive zone. He stops at the blue line, waits for his teammates to come on side and skate down to the ice, and then he tries to cross ice pass, and then that leads to an opportunity. Tampa Bay shut that down very quickly. And on the power play when that happened, there's more open ice for that to be able to work. So there were opportunities for that to happen. But at 5-on-5, there was none of that. Games 1 and 2, I mean, yeah, like that happened and the Rangers won those 2 games. That's great. But for those 4 losses, Tampa Bay totally wiped that out from Panarin's wheelhouse. That's his bread and butter. And Tampa Bay erased it completely. And Panarin didn't do much of anything to adjust to that. He kept trying to force it, and it didn't work. Tampa Bay read him like a children's picture book. And Panarin didn't do much to adjust to that. And that is a legitimate red flag that Chris Drury might have when looking at Panarin's game. Because if you want to be as objective as you possibly can be, you have to look at everything together. And is Panarin a phenom at 5 on the power play? Of course he is. Is he one of the most dynamic forwards in the world at what he does? Yes, of course. Is there a legitimate concern for how Artemi Panarin played at 5-on-5 in the playoffs? And is there a concern that he didn't do enough to adjust once teams adjusted to him? I think there's legitimacy for everything there.
So I spent a lot of time over the course of this season keeping eyes on this, trying to really unpack the Rangers' issues at 5-on-5. Because with the amount of talent they had, even prior to the trade deadline, you would think a line with Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad and lines with Ryan Strome and Artemi Panarin would be relatively close to even in terms of trading scoring chances, just because those guys are good. Like, say what you want about Ryan Strome and his limitations as a hockey player. He is an above-average hockey player. He might be a B-, but if he's riding shotgun with Panarin, he doesn't have to do as much of the work. He's a confident player. He can generate zone entries. He can generate zone exits. What the Rangers' biggest issue all year was, they didn't get to offense enough. They did not have possession of the puck in the offensive zone enough. And the times they did have the puck in the offensive zone, they only got 1 or 2 scoring chances out of that. Ideally, every time you go down the ice, you're going to hold it down there 30, 40 seconds, where even if you're not creating a scoring chance, you got zone time. You're wearing out the defense. Maybe they take a penalty. Maybe you catch them in an odd man situation where somebody's out of position. But the Rangers instead prefer to play that high leverage style where they're always looking for that cross seam pass, because if you don't get a ton of looks at all, the looks you do get, they need to be good ones. If you only get, 27 scoring chances in a game and the other team has 40, you need at least half of them, close to half of them, to be quality chances, because just to give yourself a chance in terms of the odds. And that's what the Rangers did all year. They were one of the best teams in the entire league at the average value of a scoring chance. Josh Califin was doing something about this in the regular season, and I was doing it by accident because I was just looking at something on Natural Stat Trick and I was curious about what team. And the Rangers and the Blues were 2 teams that really did this a lot, where they didn't generate a ton of chances in terms of volume, but the few chances they did generate were dangerous. And that is, I think, speaks to your point about their inability to adapt. They played one way all year in the regular season and in the playoffs. And then when they didn't have that option to fall back on, it just wasn't there. The first line with Zibanejad and Kreider and Vetrano wasn't really giving you anything. Panarin and playing with an injured Strome. So if we go from Ryan Strome, who's normally a B- to pretty seriously injured, C- a D, that's asking Panarin to do a lot to carry that line. For as good as Kopp was in spurts, he's not a line moving type player. He's a good complementary player, but he's not going to drive a line on his own. And that's why the kid line was the only good line. We said this on the first episode. That was the only group that was willing to get the puck below the goal line, go get it, and maintain zone time, make the other team make a mistake, and then score. The Rangers are going to need to add more wrinkles, more ways to play offense, because there are serious limitations of only being able to score in one way. Look at Colorado, look at Tampa. When those teams needed to slow the game down, kind of a change of pace type deal, they'll dump it in, they'll go get it, work it high to low, scoring chance, rebound, deflection. You got to have multiple ways to attack. And the Rangers just didn't have that this year. And that falls on the coaching staff and that falls on the players. Because we talked about this even before we started doing the show. Just Panarin skating into the zone and firing that backhand pass to nobody in particular, that's a waste of a possession. You get that puck below the goal line, maybe somebody can get it, as opposed to just firing it at the other team's defenseman.
Yeah, I really just dislike it, unless you're at the very end of your shift, and even then, I'm not a huge fan of it. I really don't like getting to the red line and then just dumping the puck in to change. I know it's very prolific in the NHL to do this. I hate it. I don't understand why. If you're at the end of your shift, you get to the red line, and then you're just like, "Well, here you go," and then I'm just gonna go off the ice. I hate that. I watch it every game when it happens, and it drives me insane. Because here's the thing: like, the puck is obviously the most valuable asset on the ice. If you're at the end of a shift and you're not getting pressured to give the puck up right away, if you've been in the zone for 2 minutes or however long it was, and you just desperately need to get rid of the puck, that's a situation that's an exception for me. But if you're at the end of like a 35-second shift and you're not getting pinned in your own zone and you're not getting pressured by 4 players to give up the puck, there is absolutely no need for you to get to the red line and then just dump it in and have it chased by nobody because everybody's going off on a change and just give the puck up to the other team. I have seen this happen more and more throughout the years, and it has never made any sense to me. You fight tooth and nail to get the puck. So unless you absolutely have to, why are you just throwing it to the other team and say, "Here you go, I'm out later," like, and then just let somebody else on your team deal with it? Like, that to me makes no sense. So, and that falls a lot of times on defensemen or either defensemen or a forward that is at the end of their shift. Like, if you're a forward and you're at the red line with the puck and there's not a whole ton of pressure, pass it back, dude. Go off, let a new forward come in, and then have that defenseman who is also at the end of their shift just hold on for a second, pass it out to the new forward, and then have the offense continue. I don't understand the whole process of, okay, well, everybody's tired, let me just throw the puck away and we'll deal with the onslaught again, because then it becomes a repeating process. If you're stuck in your own zone and you just throw the puck the length of the ice, okay, well, then they have the puck again. They're going to do the same thing to you. You have to stop. You have to stop the cycle. Like, at a certain point, I know that, like, I'm off on a tangent here, but like the whole point is to keep possession of the puck. That's one of the biggest weaknesses of the Rangers, is that they just don't possess at even strength. They don't possess the puck very often. And you need players that are able to not only drive possession, but also have the ability to keep the puck on the sticks of the team that they're playing for. So the Rangers don't have a lot of those players, unfortunately. And that's one of the biggest downfalls of this team at 5-on-5 is you need players that are able to have the puck on their stick and keep it either on their stick or somebody that has the same jersey as them. Because if you don't have a lot of those players, you're not going to drive a lot of offense. And what do when you don't have a lot of offense? You're not going to score goals. You're going to lose games.
It's part of the way the Rangers want to play, which is a conscious decision coaching. The difference is when Gallant was doing this in Vegas, when he was doing this in Florida, he knew those guys. He had a little bit more familiarity with them, and the wingers were a little bit better, especially compared to what they had for stretches at this season of Dryden Hunt and Barclay Goodrow and Julien Gauthier and whoever else you want to mention, Sammy Blais, who got time in the top six, who probably wasn't well suited to that. But in an ideal world, the Rangers are going to play an up-tempo style that is going to go from defense to offense quickly, and they're going to try and generate a zone entry cleanly, get that cross-team pass, shot on net, and go. If we want to play a little bit more of a rugged, a little bit more of a simple style, a little bit more possession oriented, then that's going to require a little bit of a conscious change in terms of defense and in the neutral zone. Because for most of this season, every defenseman not named Adam Fox, their default was to bank the puck off of the glass and make it somebody else's problem, as opposed to trying to skate the puck out of trouble or finding someone to pass it to. And I hear you. I know if you're Keandre Miller, if you're Jacob Trouba, do I really want to give this puck to Dryden Hunt, who's got somebody bearing down on him from behind he probably can't see? Or do I just want to bank it off the glass and worry about it in 30 seconds from now? That's the kind of micro level decision making that went into a lot of the Rangers' possession issues during the course of the season. They opted for the safe play much of the regular season. And then for that 10, 15 game stretch right after the trade deadline, they played a little bit more possession oriented. They had the puck a little bit more. They were able to do a little bit more. But when you play the same team 7 times over 2 weeks, they're going to get a cue in how you like to play. And that's the main thing we're talking about here is not only do the Rangers need to be able to play more than one style of hockey. One thing I was really thinking about today when I was doing prep for the show is a lot of the Rangers players are very one-dimensional. They're really good at one thing and only one thing, with a few exceptions. Panarin is good at passing and shooting. Zibanejad, I would say, is pretty good at both. He's not as good as Panarin at passing, but he's pretty good. And then after that, it becomes a lot of one, two-dimensional. There's not a lot of guys who are entirely well-rounded in their entire game in a way of a Nathan McKinnon, of a Gabriel Landeskog, even of a Stamkos or Kucherov. I mean, Stamkos was out there throwing the body around like he was 20 years old last night. He threw that one hit on McKinnon where he sent his entire frame into him. I don't know if I saw Zibanejad send his entire frame into anybody these entire playoffs. It's just another thing to think about in terms of you can have really good players. They might not be the right players, and that's the thing. You need guys who are good at a lot of things, and specialization has a role, but lower in your lineup. That's the main point I wanted to make there.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. I like that the top 6 really need to be puck driving players that can basically not necessarily score at whim, but be able to drive play when they have the slightest opportunity to do so. So you need players like McKinnon, like Landeskog. The Avalanche have a boatload of these players, and what do you know? They won the Stanley Cup. What a surprise. They have these players that at any given moment you are terrified, if you're the other team, that these players are going to dominate the whole game. Either a play or a period or a full 60 minutes. You're terrified that these guys are going to turn it up and they're not going to let you see the puck at all for the entire game. Good luck. See you next time. The Rangers for the playoffs didn't really have much of those players. They had on the power play, they were scared. Like the Rangers were a scary team when they had the man advantage. Like that's no secret. But at 5-on-5, can you really name me a whole lot of players on the Rangers right now that really terrify the other team, that at any given moment they could just turn it on and take over a game by themselves with no other help? Because like Panarin has the ability to do that, but he didn't really do that for much of the playoffs. Zibanejad could do that at times at spurts. We've seen him do that over the course of his tenure, either in Ottawa or as a Ranger. He has the ability to do that, but he didn't really do that in the playoffs. Chris Kreider scored a bajillion goals this season, but and he has one of the strongest frames in the entire planet. Forget hockey. I mean, this man, if he wants to, he can skate down the wing and bully himself into the front of the net and score a goal if he wanted to. He's fast. He's one of the strongest people on the ice at all times. but he didn't do that at 5-on-5 for the vast majority of the time. And that's what's frustrating to me watching this Rangers team. They have the ability, they have the players that are capable of doing these things. And yet for 90 plus percent of the time, they didn't get that done. And they lost in 6 games in the conference finals. Whereas teams like Tampa Bay and Colorado, and they have players that at any point can take over a game. And those teams had players that did that, and they led them to the final. And Colorado's case, they have Landeskog, they have McKinnon, they have Nichushkin, who is phenomenal for them. They have Lehkonen, a trade deadline acquisition. They have Cale Makar on the backhand, Sam Girard. Like, they have so many players.
That's the answer.
That
it's
are
Fox.
Dangerous.
That is the one person on the Rangers that was the one person, and he didn't do it all of the playoffs. He was pretty rough, especially in the Pittsburgh series, but that was the one guy in these playoffs that had a couple flashes of, okay, he's on the ice, they're just not getting out of their zone. He's going to walk the blue line for 30 seconds until they score here. That was the one guy these playoffs who had flashes of, okay, we're scoring here, or we're going to die trying, basically. I mean, I still think about him jumping, all of 5'10", Adam Fox jumping to keep that puck in the zone during that one shift against, I think it was Carolina. Just, you think about, you need those kinds of plays. And yes, everybody is hurt this time of year. I saw a picture of what Nichushkin's foot looked like. That was disgusting. It was all purple and swollen. It was all purple and swollen. You'll see once the parade and the cup celebration where everybody gets their day, once people start scheduling their surgeries, the horrendous injuries all these guys are playing through. So, yes, if Panarin's hurt, that's part of it. But at the same time, everybody's hurt this time of year. You got to find a way. You got to find a way to make a play here and there. And before we transition to the next part of this conversation, which is who are fun ideas of possible replacements or upgrades in these situations, if I asked you right now, the Rangers are in desperate need of a goal. There is 2 minutes to go in this game. You have your ideal alignment out there of Fox, Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad. Who's the fifth guy?
That's a good question. I mean, if you're gonna keep the kid line together, which Gerard Gallant did not do in Game 6, but we've discussed that ad nauseum, and I will remain upset about that until the end of time because it was a dumb decision. Objectively, it was we were all yelling about it before the game, during the game, after the game. It was a dumb decision, objectively. But if you're going to keep that line together, right now they don't have that fifth guy, because if you take a look at their roster right now, Andrew Kopp is a UFA and Ryan Strome is a UFA. Neither of those guys are capable of being that it factor where if you need a goal, 2 minutes to go, if you're passing it to this guy, he's going to score for you. Kopp is not that guy. He was very good in spurts in the regular season when the Rangers got him. He was phenomenal. And then it went to the playoffs, and he was good in spurts, but overall disappeared, especially against Tampa Bay. He was non-existent. Ryan Strome was injured, but also missed 75 empty net goals. So I don't really trust him to score either. So right now, the Rangers don't have a fifth guy. They also don't really have a fourth guy either. Again, because Strome and Kopp are just not those guys. You have, you have four. You have with Panarin and Kreider and Zibanejad. But like, the top six, let's say you have 4 forwards and a defenseman. You have those 4 and you have Fox. But if you really need you need more than just those 4 guys to be able to do something for you. You need a second line center that can provide that. Maybe obviously not as good as your first line center, should be able to do that. And your second line winger also shouldn't be as good at doing it as your first line winger, but they need to be able to contribute on their own when your team needs it the most. And Ryan Strome definitely could not do that. And Andrew Kopp could have done that in the regular season, but when it came down to it, especially in the conference finals, he really couldn't do that either. So the Rangers really need to address that second line, because right now it's Panarin and that's it. That's what they have. Like, if you can't see it in the audio, but if you're watching on a video, I'm shrugging because like that's what they have. They have shrug emoji. Like that's what they got, because like they're both UFAs. They got to figure it out. And right now, we'll got to wait and see.
Okay. I'm going to ask this question this way because I think this is the most interesting way we can have this conversation. Who's your crush for the offseason? Who's the guy where, even if it doesn't make a ton of sense, this is the guy you would like the Rangers to go out and either trade for or sign in free agency? Who's the guy who's moving the needle for you?
Oof. I mean, that's a tough question because the Rangers, there's a few different possibilities that the Rangers are going to go after. I mean, we've been talking about Artemi Lehkonen for such a long time now that I feel like saying his name is just a cop out. But Artemi Lehkonen would be so good in a Rangers jersey, man. Like I would love Lehkonen as a second line center. If like I think if you have Lehkonen as your second line center and have a good second line winger with Panarin and Lehkonen, and if you want to keep the kid line as the third line, because that might be the best third line in hockey, to have Lafreniere, Chytil, and Kakko there as your third line. But also, hey, give them ice time. That would be great. Please do that, and please and thank you. You know, if you keep them together and have that be your top nine, forget about who's top six versus who's top nine. If you just keep them as a line and just cycle everybody else in, that would be the ideal. Of course, I don't know. We're not Gerard Gallant. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully he doesn't scratch Kaapo Kakko in game 6 of the conference finals again. But hey, we wouldn't have done that. We wouldn't have done that to begin with, and he did. So here we are. But I would love Lehkonen as a Ranger. I think he would provide the exact kind of two-way game that the second line desperately needs, because Ryan Strome is he's a UFA, so like I guess was, unless he resigns, which I don't believe he will. But Ryan Strome was okay at offense, but he was better kind of just getting fed by Panarin for a lot of the time. He wasn't a very good driver of the offense, and Lehkonen is a much better offensive driver than Strome is. He's also much better defensively than Strome is too. So if Lehkonen is out there, I would. It's an easy answer, but I would like Lehkonen.
I don't think Lehkonen is a top 6 player on a cup winner. I think if he's on your third line, I think you're in good shape. I think if you're playing him in your top 6, you're probably stretching him a little bit thin. He's got pretty good possession numbers, but he's always also played with good possession players. I mean, him, Gallagher, and Phil Deneau last year was as close as we've seen to like a death lineup like Golden State used to run, especially at the end of games, where they'd go on the ice and the other team just wouldn't touch the puck, or if they did touch the puck, they wouldn't be able to do anything with it. I think that's the conundrum we're going to find the Rangers in now, because they've got the main pieces in place. It's trying to find the right pieces that go around those guys, the supplementary pieces. That's what's hard about building a cup winner. It's very easy to go out and get high-end talent. It's another thing to figure out how to play around that high-end talent. The Winnipeg Jets have plenty of high-end talent. They do not have a bottom 6 to speak of. The Toronto Maple Leafs have as much high-end talent as humanly possible, and they have yet to do anything of substance in these playoffs. The Bruins, great. The Bruins are a one-line team. They need a lot more depth. Figuring out the depth is the hardest part about winning in hockey, and it's going to be one of the things I talk about in my parting shot at the end of the episode, just the way Tampa's been able to graduate guys from the AHL or project guys who were undrafted or 6th, 7th round picks and brought them along slowly. That's what the Rangers desperately need to figure out, is how to get the right complementary pieces.
Well, now, that's kind of the issue here, and I got pulled up the UFA centers right now, and just really quickly, if we wanted to go over it, who is a free agent after the season? Okay, well, you have Malkin, who is nearly 36 years old, and that's not going to happen. You have Claude Giroux, who is going to ask.
He wouldn't come here.
He's going to ask for $2 quadrillion, so that'd be out of the question. And he's probably also going to want a 4 or 5 year deal, and that's just not feasible for Claude Giroux at this stage, given the Rangers cap situation. And it'd be great if Claude Giroux will come here. I doubt he will, but
he already said no once. The Rangers wanted to trade for him at the deadline, and he said no. I only want to go to Florida. So now Giroux's out, Malkin's out.
Yeah, Patrice Bergeron reportedly is going to sign a 1-year extension in Boston. I doubt. I would put my house on him retiring as a Bruin. I don't think he's going to go anywhere, right? Then you have Ryan Kessler, who's not playing. You have Philip Forsberg, who wants over $9 million.
He's more of a wing than a center too, which is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, Spot Track right now has him listed as a center, and but even then, the Rangers wouldn't be able to afford him anyway, right? Okay, yeah. So then you go down the list. You have Vinny Trocheck, who was good for Carolina. He could potentially be a Ryan Strome replacement. You have Nazem Kadri, who I would think is going to stay in Colorado unless he prices himself out. I think he's a perfect fit for what they do there, and I would imagine that he stays there unless somebody like Buffalo or Arizona or somebody gives him a massive deal, in which case go right ahead. You want a cup, then if you want to
watch out for Detroit.
Get your
watch
bag.
Out
yeah.
for Detroit.
If
watch out. Detroit is, they think they're getting there. Watch for a team like Detroit who wants to be good and is starting to get impatient. That's the kind of team that overpays for somebody like Kadri.
Yeah, Detroit definitely is on the up and up, and we'll see who they hire to be their lead guy on the bench as their head coach. But like they definitely have a lot of pieces. Moritz Seider just won Rookie of the Year. I mean, they have a lot of good pieces, and they're trending in the right direction. So Kadri could be a good fit there as well. And then you have Ryan Strome. I very much doubt that he's going to be a Ranger come next season, right? You have Ryan Getzlaf, who's probably done. He's not playing anymore. And then you just keep going down the list, and the list just keeps getting more depth as the list goes along. So in terms of like the guy that could be the instant second line center for the Rangers, there really isn't a whole lot of them out in free agency. But if they wanted to go via trade, I'm sure they could get creative, especially at the draft.
This is the thing. If hockey was 15% more like the NBA, this would be the most interesting thing, because good players get to restricted free agency in hockey, and it takes a while for them to sign. We have seen Trouba, Willie Nylander, Mitch Marner. We have seen guys go into the season and miss multiple months of the season trying to get the best possible deal as a restricted free agent. And there are some genuinely good names out there that would fill this void. Or if you wanted to play something on upside, there are plenty of 19 and 20-year-old centers who are new. The other problem is, even if you go out and trade for a 19 or 20-year-old center, is Gallant going to play them with Panarin? No. And then that defeats the purpose of giving up assets to go out and get them.
Well, so how about this, though? If you switch to restricted free agents, now, this is where it gets interesting, because the top two names are from a team that has no cap space right now, and that is the Chicago Blackhawks. Kirby Dach, RFA, Dylan Strome, RFA. Do any of those names interest you?
Kirby Dach would interest me because he was very good 2 years ago, and he broke his wrist last year, and I will never forget that sound, because it was in an empty arena, and I remember hearing the sound of his wrist breaking on the broadcast. And one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had watching sports. That's up there with Paul George breaking his leg and John Tavares getting a knee to the skull. I mean, one of the most heinous things I've ever seen on a sports broadcast. Chicago has no idea what they're doing, and even if they do, they're many years away from being a few years away, which is a good thing if you're trying to trade with them. Dach interests me, but again, I have no way of knowing if Gallant would actually use him right, or if the Rangers would use him right. He definitely interests me. He's an upside bet. He's somebody who, I think he was the captain of the Canadian World Junior team, I think 3 years ago. He had a 20-goal season, I want to say, 2 years ago, showing the ability to be good at this level. Don't know how he slides into the Rangers lineup, but that's definitely somebody you could talk me into for sure. Dylan Strome, he's basically a slightly less good version of Ryan. So if he's not expensive, sure. But I think if you trade for Dylan Strome, I think that's telling me that Filipino's going to be your second line center. If you're acquiring a Dylan Strome type of player, not even just Dylan Strome himself, but that kind of upside bet center.
How about, I have one more name for you, and this is from a team that doesn't like to spend money. And this is a team that does just will trade will give up more things just to not pay people. The Ottawa Senators, remember, if you remember correctly, traded a second round pick in addition to Zibanejad to the Rangers for Derek Brassard. I think it was for a 4th or 7th or whatever it was, because they didn't want to pay Zibanejad's bonus that he would have gotten. I think it was in July or at some point. Like he was due for a bonus. The Senators said no. Here's a second round pick in addition to Zibanejad because we refused to pay that. Right. The Ottawa Senators right now have a player by the name of Josh Norris, who has scored 55 points. 55 points on a very bad Senators team last season in 66 games. He is a restricted free agent, and he is due for a payday. That could be one of the names that the Rangers. I don't know if they're interested in him or not. I would imagine that everybody under the sun is interested in Josh Norris, but that is an intriguing name. Just to throw that out there.
It's a good one. That's another one similar to Doc, better than Doc because he was good this past season, and you slide him in, it would work. The thing
35 goal scorer, by the way. 35 goal scorer, Josh Norris, age 23.
The thing I really want to emphasize here is this is not a linear process. We talked about it last week in terms of just playoff results. Roster construction isn't linear either. It is okay if you say we're going to trade X and Y from our active roster for this player because we think he's going to help us 3 years from now as opposed to next year or 2 years from now. And that's really where we start getting into the fine-tuning of the roster. That's kind of important, and really the way to think about it, Tampa drafted Victor Hedman and Steven Stamkos in 2009 and 2010. The Avalanche drafted Nate McKinnon in, I think, 2014, 15, 14, I think. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. This takes time, and you're going to have to take things away, put things back in, and try and find that right mix. So even if the Rangers if they were to go out and trade for one of those guys that we've been talking about, and they have to trade a roster player and a prospect, that's part of this process. You cannot be a prospect clinger and try and win the Stanley Cup at the same time. You are going to have to give up good things. This is not NHL GM mode where you can just add more draft picks to the trade to get it to go through. Eventually, you are going to have to trade something good if you want something good. That's the biggest thing about the trade market. It's okay to trade good players as long as you're getting a good player back. That's perfectly fine. If you trade a good player because you feel like the guy you're getting is going to make you better, that's fine. You cannot be scared to make a trade.
Yeah, and one of the biggest teams that love to do that is not really in hockey, but it's basketball. So Oklahoma City Thunder, where they have, by my estimation, 700 draft picks.
Yes.
At a certain point, it's not like you can draft 700 players and expect all of them to play. Like, you have to leverage some of these things that you have in order to acquire somebody that could be a difference maker for your organization, right?
Yeah.
The Rangers have 700 defensive prospects. They have 400 goalie prospects. They have forward prospects as well. You can't play all of them. You can't expect all of them to be a staple on your blue. Good, yeah, but also a regular on the NHL team. You can't because there's only 6 spots on the blue line. There's only 12 spots on the on the forward line, and there's only 2 spots for goalies. Like, no matter how good you draft, there's going to be players that you draft that will not be in your organization, in the future. Like, there's physically no space for it. Even if you draft gem after gem after gem, even if you draft, and that motorcyclist, by the way, agrees with me. Like, there's even if you draft nothing but good talent, there's only so many spots to go around. So you have to trade some of these young players for somebody that can make a difference right now, especially if the cup window is opening. And making to the conference finals will dictate that, hey, maybe the window is opening. You have to move some of these pieces, whether you like it or not. Like, you can't just hold on to them forever. Eventually, you're gonna have to figure out what to do with them. And right now, the Rangers have to figure out, like, okay, well, who is on the team and who will stay on the team and who is a good player, but there is physically no space for them And it's better to move them now as opposed to holding on to them for too long and for them to lose all their value. And right now, this is the summer where Chris Drury has to figure that out for a lot of his talent, because the Rangers have big top six holes. They have a second line center hole. They have a second line wing hole that they have to fill. This is it. This is the summer where Chris Drury has to figure that out. And he has to let some prospects go. It's not pretty. It's never, it's never fun to trade prospects before you fully develop them or fully understand what kind of talent they could possibly become. But there's only so many spots on the team, and you can't just you can't clutch your pearls forever. You have to let them go at a certain point.
I wish the way they have their money set up is the real issue and why you can't go out and get anyone crazy. They have a lot of money tied up in a very few people, and we're going to talk about it the entire offseason, because this is one of the things you have to consider when you make a roster transaction. They have $40 million tied up in 5.5 players now that Fox and Zibanejad's extensions are in play. So those two with Panarin, Trouba, and Kreider, that's $46 million right there. So you got to figure out what you're going to do with the other half of your $82.5 million. So there's a lot of time for this as the offseason goes along. We'll probably get a little more detailed, a little bit better understanding, probably soon as next week, because free agency is, I think, 2.5 weeks from now, and the draft is, I think, 2 weeks from now.
10 days from now.
Yeah, something like that. So along those lines, I'll start doing a little bit more of a deep dive, Andrew, as well as specific guys for specific roles that make a little bit more sense. The bottom six is where I get really creative. If Chris Drury had called me and we had just signed Johan Larsson for $1.1 million and John Merrill for $900,000, as opposed to Gaudreau for 3.6 and Nemeth for 3.2, we'd have a whole another $4.5 million to play with. And those guys were actually good this year. Johan Larsson was good on the Coyotes. Do you know how hard it is to be good on the Coyotes, Andrew?
It's not easy. It is not easy.
Okay, so the last topic we have here, before we wrap up, it is just about that time. I'm going to start. Andrew did his first last week. I'm going to start here. The parting shot, the last thing I want to leave you with. Mine is titled, Why the AHL Matters. For most of my hockey viewing life, the Rangers have treated the Hartford Wolfpack the way a high school treats a math class with a substitute teacher. They throw the kids in there. They hope nobody gets hurt. They leave somebody in charge. There is technically adult supervision, but most of the time, the principal understands that no work is going to be handed in to the teacher at the end of the period. The only hope is that there is nothing that causes a student to be suspended or the substitute teacher to be arrested. The Hartford Wolfpack are a convoluted compilation of pieces. There's no rhyme or reason in trying to make the pieces fit together to have a successful team. The team's leading scorer this past season, Anthony Greco, who got a cup of coffee with the Rangers, I think he played 3 or 4 games, he just signed in Sweden. Johnny Brodzinski, who had flashes of being an okay NHL fourth liner, he is a restricted free agent this coming up season. They spent Nils Lundqvist down there. They sent Vitaly Kravtsov down there for stretches. The Rangers need to take the AHL more seriously than high school kids take a substitute teacher in math class, because you look at what the Tampa Bay Lightning have done with their AHL program, where they have graduated players like Ross Colton, like Eric Chernak, like Jan Ruta, like Andre Palat, like Alex Killorn, like Braden Point, like Brett Howden. You think about all of these guys who have
Rangers legend Brett Howden, the UNI.
All of the people who have come through that Syracuse Crunch program who have become NHL regulars. And the thing the Lightning do that matters is they just have their AHL team set up so it's actually a team. It is not just a compilation of pieces that are there that they have waiting for if the NHL team needs them. They construct the Syracuse Crunch roster in a way that they are competitive at the AHL level, and it gives them time to marinate. Most of those guys I just mentioned had at least 100 AHL games before they got called up to the NHL. That is in direct contrast to what the Rangers have done with most of their prospects, who, for the most part, have gotten 40 games or less and then thrown into the fire. The Rangers need to find a way to start graduating players from the AHL to the NHL, because that is how you save money in your bottom six. When you can produce a third pair lefty and they only cost you $1.25 million because you raised them from a seventh round pick, a sixth round pick, a fifth round pick, and they went from 600,000 as a fifth round pick to 1.25 million, and then you have their restricted free agent years and their money's down. You think about Ross Colton, who was leading the Lightning in playoff goals until the series against the Rangers, who scored the cup winning goal last year against Montreal, who AHL graduate. The Rangers need to start graduating AHL players so they can save money in their bottom six. You should not have to pay a fourth line center $3.6 million like Barclay Goodrow. That's just bad accounting. That is bad roster construction. If you could develop a fourth line center and save $3 million, that makes your whole team better, because that's $3 million you have to put in other places that isn't fourth line center. That's what I'm leaving you with. Please leave the worksheet that the substitute teacher handed out at the beginning of the period on the desk and go to seventh period, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great point by you. And also, I think the one parting shot that I have is that coaching matters, man. Like, there was a break with, I think, 5.5 minutes to go when the third period of Game 6. And when they came back from break, the broadcast was talking about how Jared Bednar was huddled around the entire team with a whiteboard, and for the entirety of the break was telling his team what to do. He was telling his team, okay, this is our plan, this is our strategy, and how we're going to execute it, and how we're going to basically control the final 5 minutes here and win the Stanley Cup. Jared Bednar was doing that for the entirety of the break. And the broadcast said this, that doesn't happen very often. Most coaches don't do that. And Jared Bednar has won at the ECHL level, the AHL level, and now at the NHL level. He's the first coach ever to win at those three levels. So Jared Bednar knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. And it's so important to differentiate the Jared Bednars and all these against other coaches that I don't like. Like
David Quinn, who's going to get hired by the Boston Bruins.
That's a whole different problem for them. But yeah, like, the John Coopers and Jared Bednars of the world are really, really good at what they do. And we know they're very good at what they do because of the way that they coach during games, right? Because of the adjustments that they make. Most adjustments take place before puck drop. But if you're at the S tier level of coaching in the NHL, you are making adjustments on the fly as well. You are noticing, if you do this, then that stops them from doing that, or they're making adjustments as the game goes on. That is one of the biggest things that differentiates the top of the top from everybody else in the NHL. And Jared Bednar really solidified himself as one of the best coaches in the world because of the way that he can read a play and he can read the situation better than pretty much anybody out there. In the hockey space, he is so good at seeing what's going on and what could potentially happen and how to adjust for that, how to change some things, how to tweak that, change this, how to make everything flow so well. And you really saw the fruits of his labor this season. And we saw it coming up to the season as well, right? Yeah. I mean, the unfortunate second round loss for the Avs, last season, a couple of years ago, we saw the progression of Jared Bednar as a head coach in the National Hockey League. And it really culminated into a phenomenal run by the Colorado Avalanche. And you can have all the talent in the world. If you don't have a great head coach to really wrangle everybody and bring everybody in and say, this is the plan and how to execute it perfectly to a T, then you can't win. And Jared Bednar had all this talent, he took it and he made it even better. And we saw that in Game 6. Like I said earlier, the Lightning were down a goal in the third period of a Stanley Cup elimination game. They had 4 shots on goal because of Jared Bednar and his system to absolutely and totally dominate the Tampa Bay Lightning at all facets of the ice. And so much credit goes to Jared Bednar. Coaching matters, man. We sometimes the coaching carousel with Tortorella and Galan and Paul Maurice for some reason these coaches get bounced around, but you need a coach that can see plays before they happen, that can adjust to maximize the probability that their team that is going to win the game. And Jared Bednar is one of those coaches, and he deserves credit for it.
They lost 4 games the entire playoffs. That
Yep.
Just to put it in perspective, they went 16-4 over the course of the postseason. Pretty ridiculous.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. I think personally, in my opinion, it's pretty good.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. That'll just about do it for episode 3. We were good today. We were concise, a little bit less tangents. We're getting better as we go along. That's the goal. Try and do a little bit better every single week.
Yeah. I mean, 90-minute episodes are great. If you listened or watched all 90 minutes, then we appreciate you. Last week, but we are trying to keep it to around an hour, just for we don't want to ramble and say things for too long, because again, if we say things now, then we're gonna run out of time. Come August, what are we gonna talk about? I mean, come on, Nick. We have to save some things in our back pockets for later on in the show. But if you missed this episode, you can watch the video version on our YouTube page, Liberty Blue Pod. You can follow us on Twitch at Liberty Blue Pod for the next episode. Follow us, and you will be notified when we go live the next time. We will do this every single Monday, potentially some other special broadcasts as well as time goes on. We have a lot planned and in the books. We have, if you just want the audio, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on everywhere that you find your podcasts. Just search Liberty Blue and you will find us there as well. Nick, where can they find you though?
You can find me on Twitter at Nick Zararis. Hang on. I live at the crossroads of a 4-way intersection, so I constantly have cars revving. Everybody loves to rev their Honda engine at my intersection for whatever reason. But at Nick Zararis, Nick, everybody can spell Nick, Zararis. Andrew is Chelney Andrew, Chelney. That's where you can find us on Twitter. Hockey's going to give us a lot of things to make fun of over the next 2 weeks leading up to the draft and free agency. So be sure to follow us there. Be sure to follow the show. We'll see you guys next week.